Differentiating the Process by Dr. Jennifer Levin-Goldberg. This is part 3 of a series. Hello, this is Dr. Jennifer Levin-Goldberg. You're about to view the presentation, Differentiating the Process. This is part 3 of a 4-part series. In this presentation, I will go over how you can differentiate the process, strategies, and examples that you can employ in order to properly implement it. There are some links. These links within the presentation contain examples I created that will model or exemplify what it is that I'm referring to. Also, there are some videos. You need to click onto the video in order to view it. I hope you enjoy the presentation. Thank you. What does it mean to differentiate the process? It is the instruction or the what the students will be learning. Where to begin when differentiating the process? Well, use instructional strategies and approaches that accommodate the various multiple intelligences, learning styles, and academic readinesses of the student population. Some students may need more scaffolds and tiering, whereas others may need more enrichment in order to maintain academic rigor, engagement, and motivation. Providing multi-level tasks, also known as tiering, addresses student achievement readiness levels. FYI, the difference between scaffolding and tiering is that tiering is a strategy to employ where various degrees of difficulty toward a task, activity, and product aligns with the student's readiness. It can also contend with the amount of time, structure, and resources when adjusting for levels of academic readiness. Scaffolds are learning supports that students utilize in order to work at their readiness level. For example, if teaching students to add, providing some students with an abacus to assist in counting would be a scaffold. If students need assistance with computation, a calculator would be considered a scaffold. Before reading a particular book, reviewing or teaching specific vocabulary terms in advance they will come into contact with during the reading is a scaffold. If teaching World War I, providing students a map of Europe pre-World War I, it's a scaffold. So, tiering a task may include scaffolds to help students master the concept, topic, or skill.
I have the pleasure to present to you Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. Five score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. And so we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summit of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until that is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But that is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is They have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. As we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied. As long as our body is heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the city. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friends, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, "My country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring. And when this happens, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, "Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last."
Another way to differentiate the process is by accommodating the sundry of multiple intelligences, by incorporating readings, speeches, music, problem solving, art, videos, images, models, physical movements. Experimenting, individual student reflection time, visiting a zoo, journal writing, field trips, taking the class outside, inquiries regarding life, collaborative or cooperative groups, or independent study. Accommodate the various learning styles by considering if there will be music in the background, the lighting, temperature of the room, how much structure or scaffolding there will be. Will there be opportunities for some students to multitask and those that need to take on one task at a time? The emotional state of the student. Did they just break up with their significant other or are fighting with their BFF? Will they be working alone, in groups, or with a teacher or an expert? What about the time of day? Will they be moving around? Are their physiological needs taken care of, such as food and sleep? Are they left brain or right brain thinkers? Are some students impulsive and others reflective? Do they need to see the big picture or learn it in sequences or chunks? This is an extensive list. Incorporating all will be laborious and perhaps at times impractical. One way to accomplish this is by offering choices to students as a vehicle for learning the material or skill. Research demonstrates that when students are proffered a choice in their learning activities, there was an increase in academic performance and engagement. What are the strategies for differentiating the process? Incorporating the various multiple intelligences and learning styles into the instruction is one of them. Tiering the instruction is number 2. Here, the teacher varies the levels of complexity within the tasks, activities, and strategies in order for students to successfully master the material. Learners can do this independently or with a small group of students sharing the same readiness levels. For those more advanced learners, enrichment activities can be infused at this time. For struggling students, the teacher can work independently or in a small group with them in order to facilitate and bolster their mastery of the concept, topic, or skill. There's a video on this slide, so go ahead and click onto the video. A third way is through choice boards. These are organizers or menus that contain diverse tasks, activities for students to complete. The learner may select from one to several in order to learn the concept, topic, or skill. The choices should represent activities and tasks complementing the plethora of learning styles and multiple intelligences. A type of choice board is a tic-tac-toe board, which allow a student to perform 3 multiple tasks in order to learn and practice the new material or skill. They can be created by arranging 3 different learning styles and multiple intelligences and tiered activities in order to help students learn using their strengths as well as developing their weaknesses. They can also be designed by arranging the board where all 3 learning tasks align with their learning style, multiple intelligence, and their academic readiness. On this slide, I have a link that you may click onto for several choice boards that I created to serve as an example for you. A fourth way is tiering the resources. Provide an array of resources with various degrees of complexity, such as books with different reading levels, presentation material, questioning strategies, non-linguistic organizers, web quests, games, discussion groups, and so forth. Usually, this goes hand in hand with tiering the instruction and learning centers, but not always. On this slide, there is an example of a child needing more advanced resources than the average, so you can click onto the video to view it. A fifth way is learning centers. These are centers that focus on practicing a variety of activities in order to master a concept, topic, or skill. They are self-paced. Some students may need to spend more time in one center than another. Before leaving a center, there should be a formative assessment for the learner to successfully master before leaving that center's learning focus. The difference between applying learning centers to differentiate the content versus differentiating the process is that in differentiating the content, the focus in the learning center is on the content to be learned, whereas in differentiating the process, the center is oriented toward practicing and mastering the concept, topic, or skill via variegated activities. A sixth way is anchor activities. These are relatively short, meaningful activities meant to deepen the understanding of the concept, topic, or skill. These are an excellent way to enrich those students who have mastered the content via performing a specific activity. Instead of having these learners be bored while awaiting their peers to complete an activity, they can be given an anchor activity to sustain engagement and learning. This also gives the teacher an opportunity to spend time with those learners struggling. These can be done alone or with a small group. For example, in social studies, when studying the 50 states and their capitals, asking advanced learners to create a class mnemonic for the states and their capital. Proposing an experiment and utilize the scientific method regarding a concept or topic currently under study in science. Reading a book of their choice and forming a literacy circle discussing how the selected book relates to a concept or topic currently discussed in language arts. And locating how the current mathematical concept or topic under study influences economics, politics, or art using various forms of media and math. These are all examples of anchor activities. And a seventh way is flexible grouping. Many of you are already very familiar with flexible grouping. On this particular slide, I have 3 links that you can click onto that go into detail about what flexible grouping is and the ways in which you can implement it for differentiation. This concludes our presentation on differentiating the process. So now I'd love for you to please view Part 4, Differentiating the Product.